So, hello and welcome. We are now broadcasting live to all the attendees, and the participant numbers are roaring up. It must have been a little issue we had. We had to start the broadcast so a number of you could join, but we're roaring up and increasing at an incremental rate. I welcome you all here today to Ireland Is Fintech. I hope that you can see me clearly on the video. If you are having any problems accessing the video, please check those links in the email that you received. We are having just one of our panel members dialing in a few minutes, but on the line at the moment, we have myself, Peter Oakes, here at Fintech Ireland. You should also be able to see Paul Ryan, Director at the Department of Finance, Elizabeth McKeever as well from GECKO Governance, and Gary TransferMate. So Paul, Elizabeth, Gary, and Elizabeth, Paul, and Gary, you're most welcome. Just to the panelists, you have control over your own video buttons and your mute buttons. So if you, for some reason, need to speak and you can't unmute yourself, please just raise your hand or something like that, and I will take care of that. So very much welcome, and the idea for today is to talk through what is happening in the Irish fintech system, and also tying that into the EU action plan, or the consultation paper issued by the EU for a new digital finance strategy, and also the EU fintech action plan. Now, as part of these series of webinars, we've done 3 or 4 now, and we'll have a few more coming up in the next while. And some people out there who are attending this event may actually have ideas as well for other events, so please do let me know. So what I'd like to do is just go through some welcome notes. And if you can see the screen there, I will try and open that up in their proper format for you, so it's easy enough to watch and see. Right. Just I'm going to look at one of the panelists here. The panelists, you can see they're connected to the FinTech ecosystem network.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so a lot of this comes out. This webinar comes out of the work we've been doing behind the scenes to track the FinTech companies here in Ireland. We're tracking around 380 companies that tell us that they're a FinTech company. Actually, it's probably gone up to about 400 in the last 2 weeks. And when I say they tell us they're FinTech, we certainly aren't the judge of who is and who isn't FinTech. But what we do is we have a look at the website, we have a look at the product offering to make sure that it's not just in beta and that there is something of substance behind it. We've got the Fintech Ireland survey, which I'll come back to, which has done quite well in a number of responses, 195 received to date. Great sort of connection through the email subscriber list. And it's an opt-in service. We don't add you unless you've been to an event or you've opted in. And we also have a very strong LinkedIn presence as well. Lots of followers on Twitter, where we find most traction, and in fact a great place for research on FinTech if you are looking around for FinTech information. And we have, I think we've done about, well, I've been involved in about 70 events where the Fintech Ireland brand's been used, and also around about 9,000 audiences. Now, Ireland for Finance, I think, fits in quite neatly here. Minister for Finance and Public Expenditure and Reform, Pascal Donoghue, said at the time of Ireland for Finance being released that unless you change to meet the ongoing challenges and opportunities of our modern dynamic world, there is a danger of standing still and eventual decline. And those of you who have been keeping abreast of government news, and maybe Paul may mention this in passing in his presentation, we had the program for government issued yesterday. FinTech gets a mention in there, as there's lots of support for SMEs. So something which is a lot of FinTech companies are struggling with at the moment in terms of finance and all the rest. There is, please do have a look at the program for government as well to help inform your thinking, and I think also to inform the thinking in relation to the survey. So again, our panelists, we're just waiting for Sorcha to join, and she's on there as our third speaker, so we have a bit of time still up our sleeves. But Ireland, why Ireland? Well, in looking at the Ireland for Finance strategy, it came about. And I guess based upon some of these numbers here, and my thanks to organisations like IDA Ireland, IFS Ireland, any others that you can turn to pull this data together. So Ireland is home to 10,000 regulated funds, so says the Central Bank of Ireland. We're the fourth largest exporter of financial services here in the European Union, and that's probably now number 3 if you say that the UK is part of the European Union. We have 250 of the world's largest financial services companies, including half of the world's top 50 banks and 17 of the top global 20 banks. The mutual funds industry, or the Irish funds industry here in Ireland, another great contributor to the economy, looks after, in terms of assets under administration, just under 5 trillion, 4.9 trillion. And that's across 14,000 funds, both domiciled and administered in Ireland. So an incredible number, and a lot of regulatory technology and fintech going on there. Pre-COVID numbers, 45,000 directly employed in international financial services, and there may be an update on those numbers before the COVID and after COVID. And then also 7,000, about 15% work in financial technology, with large contributions to the Irish Exchequer. Now, what I'll do here is I'll just pause for breath, and what I would like to do is, if I may, I am going to turn now just out of sort of slide order, just to introduce you the panel members that we have on the line, and then they'll be quiet while I'm going through, so to speak, the next session, which is about the survey and what we're seeing in the ecosystem. And then each will return for their own segment, and then all of us will join then join a panel discussion. So, Elizabeth, just if you could hear me, I just wonder if you might just quickly introduce yourself. I don't know. Introduce yourself. I'll come back to our slide here, and what you do at GECKO Governance. So, Elizabeth, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Peter. My name is Liz McKeever, and I work at GECKO Governance. We're headquartered here in Dundalk. Prior to joining GECKO last year, I spent 10 years working in fund administration in a boutique fund admin firm in Dublin.
Hi, thank you very much. Gary, just over to you briefly to introduce yourself, and then I'll turn to Paul.
Hey, Peter. Hey, everybody. So I'm the Chief Product Officer with TransferMate Global Payments. So we make it easier for businesses that are trading internationally to send and receive payments. We're also invested in by AIB and ING, as well as being the only non-US payments institution to have a partnership with Wells Fargo Bank.
Perfect. Listen, thank you for that, Gary. Paul, just a brief introduction, if you wouldn't mind too, please.
Okay, Peter, thank you, and hello to everybody. My name is Paul Ryan. I head up the International Finance Division in the Department of Finance. One of our roles is looking after policy development on international financial services, and that would include the launch last year of Ireland for Finance. That's the government's 5-year strategy for the development of international financial services, and that's underpinned by an action plan for each year as well. We're currently involved in the DJ FISMA, the European Commission's outreach on fintech and sustainable finance, and that's why we're here today, just to talk about that in some more detail. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. So I'll continue on into the session here, where I'll talk about the survey, and not in a few more minutes, Gary Conroy will come on to discuss in more detail the payments piece, which is about European and global innovation from Ireland. So we have conducted a survey which has led to this map here, the Fintech Ireland Map, and many folk may have seen this map. It's just one depiction of what we feel is going on in the Reg Tech and Fintech markets here in Ireland. It's an Indigenous map, and what I mean by that is international companies you won't find on this map, but my colleague at Fintech Ireland, Peter O'Halloran, is working on an international fintech map, because we do have a lot of people saying they'd like to get onto the map, and this one we really created for Indigenous financial services. But if you do want to see an international map at the moment, do have a look at IDA Ireland's website. They have a great website and excellent content up there about what is going on in the fintech ecosystem. And when we get to the talk about the EU consultation paper, what I would point out is that the EU consultation paper is asking a lot of questions around the area of regulatory technology. So that second biggest sector there in the on our map. Also questions around insurance technology, artificial intelligence and big data, also blockchain, also sustainable finance. Payments is not per se called out, but I guess it's because it's so integrated into the existing fintech ecosystem. But in areas of innovation, the use of APIs, etc., there is certainly coverage of that in the consultation paper, just as there is around credit and lending. And it's really worth having a look at that consultation paper. Oh, sorry, can you still hear me? I just knocked my headset. So another way of looking at the 230 companies that, or the 230 fintechs that are indigenous in Ireland, is this diagram here. And of course, it's broken down into the same sectors as you saw on the previous map. And as you can see, payments is the largest one with 58, but Reg Tech is hot on the heels at number 39. And when you start thinking about cybersecurity, we may have to have a separate portion of the map for cybersecurity as well. They are fitting into Reg Tech, but they could also sit in other areas. Again, just another depiction of the map. And some of these slides here today, we'll get these out to you via a hyperlink or an email after the presentation comes to an end. Now, mentioning Reg Tech, I think it is important to stop and have a quick discussion of it. I mean, particularly because Elizabeth's on the line, and you would have seen Elizabeth and actually Gary's businesses on the Fintech Ireland map. But you'll also see GECKO governance as well there, Elizabeth, there on this Reg Tech Ireland map. And we haven't really issued this map in any way, shape or form because we're going to put a lot of international companies that are doing Reg Tech in Ireland on this map. And that work will come out of what Peter O'Halloran is doing in his spare time. We want to sort of create this sort of different depiction of what's going on in fintech, because Reg Tech is such a big area. And I know Elizabeth wants to talk about this in her presentation. She made some comments to me ahead of today's webinar. In terms of regulated fintech, look, at the moment, these are the firms that are regulated in Ireland. And of course, there may be other businesses which are called fintech and they are regulated, but this is just the map of electronic money and payment services firms. So we have 12 electronic money and we have 18 payment services firms. Included in those payment services numbers are also these new account initiation service provider companies, such as Circuit, Thrift, and also Finclude. And I know a few of those folk are on the phone, are on the webinar today. So you're all more than welcome to Ireland, and congratulations on getting your license. And you can sort of see that although it's still a smallish number, I guess, compared to some other jurisdictions, there are some quite strong names. And I think if you're involved in the authorisation of companies here in Ireland, you've probably noticed a big uptick in people calling you from fintech companies overseas in the last 2 weeks. Just another way of having a look at this is this depiction here of regulated fintech and Reg Tech. Now, I'm not going to stop on these, but what I wanted to point out was that at the moment, 571 and 273 or thereabouts payment institutions and electronic money companies actually passport into Ireland. So that map we showed of the regulated fintech is not the only story about the fintech EMIs and payment services firms doing business in Ireland. There are all these businesses here, those numbers that passport into Ireland. My thanks to the central bank for providing those figures. So said, part of what we're talking about here today is in relation to the survey. And what I'd like to say, this is the Fintech Ireland survey here, and then I'll dovetail into the EU consultation paper. We asked from the survey a number of questions, in starting with what part of Ireland are you located in? And over 91.5%, say 92%, come from the Republic of Ireland. We are an all of Ireland group, and Northern Irish firms, Northern Irish fintech firms do complete the survey as well, and a number of them are also on the map. and about 9% of the survey results we've got of 195 come from Northern Ireland. Of all the counties in Ireland, Dublin has the most fintech that have completed the survey. So if you're in the other regions, please do complete the survey, because by completing the survey, you upload your logo and then we can put you onto the map. Now, we also asked some questions about what sector within fintech does your company operate. And the number one area of response from firms, actually number one type of firm that responded, was actually Reg Tech. So we had more responses from Reg Tech to the survey than we did with payments. And I suspect that's probably because most of the payments companies we had previously identified, and they're already on the map. So there's probably less impetus for or a need for a payments company to do the survey to see the logo on the map. But the difference between the two is not very much, actually, in terms of those completions. I think Reg Tech, it's around about 37 companies completed it from Reg Tech, and 30 from payments. The next bracket, others, was very interesting. A huge number of firms choosing to go to what we call the other bracket, and a big call out: could we create a trade finance sector on the map? Insurance was the fourth largest area. Now, they weren't Indigenous, and that will explain why we're still quite small on the Fintech Ireland map. But if we expand that map out to an international map, you will see a lot more InsurTech being represented. I think what's interesting is blockchain banking and crypto assets are towards the bottom. And even on our Fintech Ireland map, you'll see that's one of the smallest sectors. Now, banking, that map, our map is for Fintech companies. So you wouldn't expect the likes of the banks to be completing the survey. So that would explain that. But I do think there's a fair bit of work we can do to identify further blockchain companies that point themselves at financial services. In terms of how many employees does the company have, we looked at it. When I look at the size of the companies, the size of companies that responded, those with less than 10 were provided the bulk of the replies to the survey. And then the next bulk of number two, so to speak, came from companies with a size of 10 to 20 employees. Number three came from those firms of 20 to 50. Sorry, excuse me, that should be number four. That's a typo there. Number four, the size of firm with 100, that was number four. And number five was 50 to 100. So the order is correct, but forgive me, you swap 4 and 5 over as their numbers, but number fourth was size 100. Is your company expecting to hire? Now, obviously, we asked this question well before COVID, leading into COVID, and the answer from 96% was yes, and we can talk about that through the panel about the impact. There are some other questions that we asked, such as gender, board and management at board and management levels, revenue, investment raised, and investment required. Now, we're not going to stop on this webinar and discuss those because there's too much detail there, but we will look to run another webinar on those topics. And if you're interested in that topic, do get in touch. What I would point out is that when we asked, is Ireland an easy place to raise investment, 4.4% said they strongly agreed, and 20% said they agreed. 24% said they disagreed, and 6% said they strongly disagreed. So the agrees lumped together and the disagrees lumped together are pretty much the same, and a big portion in the middle, that 45% said they neither agreed nor disagreed. So we're neutral on that statement. One thing I would say to you folks is, if you have access to the Q&A module, do send your questions and I'll start having a look at those as well. In terms of priority regions for overseas expansions, this was actually quite an interesting one. When we asked Irish FinTech where they were looking to expand, the number one option chosen was the United Kingdom, and there were 8 regions, which included Asia as well, and the Middle East. But the top 3, number 1 was the United Kingdom, number 2 was North America, and number 3, and it was beaten by a large margin by number 2, was Europe. So we probably want to unpack that a little bit further. But look, again, in relation to the EU consultation paper, I suggest that there's a real need for for Irish FinTech to complete the consultation paper and have our voice heard. And we probably need to unpack a little bit more about, is Europe not a region for expansion, because a lot of the firms benefit from a passport? So that may be part of that discussion. in relation to key challenges, the key challenges in relation to the responses we received from firms was quite interesting as well. Only 14% said that Brexit was a key challenge. 41% said that equity funding was a challenge, and 17.5% said getting debt funding was a challenge. Finding and retaining talent, which we'll cover off in a separate webinar, 55% of respondents said that was a particular challenge. Getting access to bank accounts wasn't a big challenge, 10%, but this was of all respondents. Obviously, if you are providing regulated services, you may find it sometimes difficult to get the account. So that number needs to be looked at through a different lens. Interesting question with relation to cyber security. Only 17% said that was a key challenge. We might ask Gary a question about that when we go into the panel session as to whether or not we, same as you, Elizabeth, Liz, as to whether that may have changed post-COVID. That is a pre-COVID number, okay? And government support, 22% said that getting support from the government was a challenge, and that's hence I would recommend the government program for government. Also, another key challenges, competition from incumbents and entrants wasn't considered to be all that high, only 15, 16%. Getting authorised and registered. At first glance, this looks pretty positive, only 15%. But what we ask people to think about is that although it's just 15%, the vast majority of respondents, 85%, do not actually require an authorisation. So if I drill that down to companies that have or would likely need an authorisation because they're on the perimeter or going through that, I suspect that number at 15% would be higher. In relation to ongoing regulation, only 20% said that was a challenge. But this is another great reason for the EU consultation paper, because you'll get your say on regulation in relation to the FinTech Action Plan as well, particularly around technology neutrality. And over 60% of the companies that did the survey also completed our feedback form. Now, as I just mentioned, Gary is popping up next. And before I just jump to you, Gary, and Elizabeth, and then, excuse me. What I'll do, Gary, is I might just jump into your 5 minutes now, then Elizabeth's, then Paul's, and then Sorcha's, and then I'll come back and just talk us through a little bit of the EU consultation paper itself, and then we'll start the panel session if that's okay. So Gary, it's over to you. You don't have any slides, so I'm just going to leave this one slide up for you, and I might put myself on mute and turn off my video for a moment so I can just work out the technical issue we're having with one of the panelists.
Great, thanks, Peter. So yeah, hopefully you guys can see me. You get the static picture, and you also have the live video. So as per Peter's introduction in terms of sectors that have been very successful in Ireland in financial services, you have the fund administration sector, aviation, finance, and leasing, and payments. So I've been in payments for about 15 years or so, and before that I was in banking, so it was never too far away. But in terms of Ireland being a good place to do business and driving innovation, both in Ireland, across Europe, and globally, really, I think the key thing that I've seen in my experience is about the people and the ideas. So you really have, there's global R&D labs and centres that we have, and a lot in payments, where you have MasterCard's R&D labs, and indeed looking to add another 1,500 jobs. You have Citi in Nina, you've got Fiserv with their R&D centre, and Flexco recently tying up with IT Tralee. But on my side, I've been dealing mostly with Indigenous entrepreneurs. So in TransferMate, that helps businesses send and receive payments internationally, the founder is Terry Clune, and Terry set up a group of businesses that all fall under the tax-back group. And originally, he was really getting tax back for backpackers and students that were going abroad for the summer and working in Germany. And he would help them get their tax back from having worked there for the summer, and gradually grew that business and really grew other businesses and pivoted as he needed to as the situation arose. So went from helping students getting their tax back to helping companies get their VAT back. And then from there, looking at some of the other challenges that companies were having, and particularly finance organizations and their back office issues. So, moving people abroad. Well, how do I get my payroll to them? So doing global payroll. And so you span out another company called Immedis on top of the tax-back business. And then really looking at how do I move money internationally, because, all of the companies were having issues moving money using the normal correspondent banking rails. So, through the regulation as a driver for innovation, the first Payment Services Directive, so a lot of talk about Payment Services Directive 2, but back in 2009, TransferMate was born really as a payments institution, and so regulated under the Payment Services Directive. And since then went on getting regulated, not just in Ireland and passporting to Europe and with an e-money license in the UK, but being regulated in the US, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and in the US you need to be regulated in each and every state. And more recently across Hong Kong, Singapore, and Dubai, and continuing to roll that out. So for those respondents in the survey that said they found it challenging getting regulated in one jurisdiction, you can only imagine what it's like trying to do that on a global basis. But really, when I look at what's the best thing that can create innovation-led financial services business, it's supporting people like Terry to be able to grow businesses. And in my previous business as well was with Relex Payments, and that was with Column Line, who set it up. And of course, Column is represented in the current Fintech Ireland Map through Fire Financial Services, which offers multi-currency accounts in sterling and euro. So, where you have this entrepreneurial spark and these ideas, I think being able to not only attract, foreign direct investment and driving innovation through, the R&D labs, but supporting entrepreneurs to build more and more businesses, create more jobs, and create more value for Irish fintech. I think having said that, though, there was a little bit of a mention of COVID that Peter had earlier, and I think for most companies at this stage, it's less about the long-term vision of driving innovation. It's really a lot about survival at the moment, particularly with the respondents from Fintech Ireland, who, with the average number, the number one group that responded were less than 10 employees. It's a very difficult time to be a startup and trying to grow your business. I mean, and not just COVID, between that and Brexit, and making sure that you're paying attention to things like Black Lives Matter and being able to give back, having diversity programs, and of course the programs for government and all the change that's happening around that. So it very much feels like we're living through history. And from a payments perspective, COVID is, I think apart from the rather depressing news of another cluster coming out of Beijing today, probably the biggest thing that it's done is accelerated things that have been trying to make happen for years. So contactless payments limits going up to 50 euros, really becoming totally the norm, but also the digitization. So, Peter mentioned cybersecurity, but it's not just cybersecurity, it's the ability for employees to work remotely. So, there are weeks where decades happen, like according to Lenin, and this is kind of the opportunity, right, to accelerate disruption that is happening anyway, but often happening, at a slower pace. So, TransferMate, for example, take advantage of this. So, it's some public agencies looking to purchase, some PPE equipment, we're able to facilitate them to make that payment in a much faster, more accurate way. So using some of the traditional rails, they're having problems paying some suppliers in China, whereas through ourselves, using TransferMate's global network of local accounts, we're able to make sure that we got it there on time and 100% accurately. So where it becomes critical, there are opportunities, I think, for innovation within that as well. And of course, the drive from a digitization perspective, one of the big strategic initiatives from TransferMate perspective is to allow platforms to embed international payments within them. So we work with the likes of Coupa, Tradeshift, SAP Concur, that are all accounts payable systems. They've all seen a big uptake in terms of their usage. Coupa, I think, was one of the top 10 COVID stocks. So, again, that's an opportunity. So while things are changing, I think while there may be challenges, there will also be opportunities. And one of the more interesting things that's going to come out of it, I think 55% in that FinTech survey said that talent acquisition and retention is an issue. So, with Ireland, but Dublin in particular, often you'll find cost of salaries and cost of housing being an issue in as much as retaining talent. So it'll be interesting to see how we can accelerate regionalization. But then there's also the potential threat that if someone can be based outside of Dublin, they may be based, in Clare, but likewise, could they be based in the Ukraine, or are we now competing with Eastern Europe as well, from a talent perspective? And of course, commercial property, not just residential housing that will have completely changed, but commercial real estate as well. I think, there's a great, for those businesses that are looking to see what supports are available, there's a great site by the Department of Business Enterprise and Innovation that tracks the amount of disbursement of assistance for companies that have been affected by COVID-19. So, maybe, I'm sure you're doing separate sessions on this, Peter, but it was kind of interesting to see when you look at, as of this morning, I took a look at it, and there were 2,773 businesses that were eligible to apply for and have applied for the working capital scheme, but only 451 loans that were approved. So, how do we help businesses to make sure they get through this period of difficulty so that they can come out the other end stronger and, add to innovation? So I think some good things out of the program for government as well over the last couple of days. There were commitments around setting out clear measurable targets around a survival rate of high growth startups, supporting the role of venture capital and enhancing the role of the SBCI, the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, to get those funding. I was mentioning the difficulty in some companies are having in obtaining that COVID funding. Well, actually, if we're going to get more funding to those SMEs, and there's a commitment in the program for government, that's to be welcomed, as well as just a review of the taxation for SMEs, entrepreneurs, capital gains tax for, sustainable businesses as well. So I think some challenging times for a lot of business, but some very promising things coming out of the program for government. And, from a digitization perspective, it offers the opportunity for smaller businesses to be more nimble. So that's me, Peter. I think if you want to, I don't know, did you want to pause here or hand over to Elizabeth or somebody else?
No, thank you for that, Gary. Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll jump over to Elizabeth or Liz. Sorry, is it Lizzie or Liz?
Anything at all, Peter.
Oh, okay, sorry. I always go for the full name. So Elizabeth, over to you. And what I may ask you to do when we do your, as we go through your slides, you might just tell me, I'll start on your blue slide next. So there's your introductory slide. And I will start with this slide here for you. Is that correct?
Yep, that's perfect.
Would you be so kind as to tell me to move on to the next slide when you want me to do that?
Yeah, no worries. It's actually towards the end then we move to the other slide. So I'll speak about the first slide for the first part. Super.
Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. So good afternoon again. Good morning to everyone, depending where in the world you are. My name is Elizabeth, Lizzie McKeever, and I work at GECKO Governance as Head of Operations. GECKO is a leading Reg Tech company headquartered here in the metropolis of Dundalk, Ireland, and we provide solutions for financial institutions globally with offices in the US and Australia. A big thank you to Peter and Fintech Ireland for organising this event and for having me here today. I'm going to give you my views on why Ireland is synonymous with Reg Tech. This is a question that comes up a lot, and one that I was recently asked when presenting to the Japanese regulator in Tokyo. The Japanese were really intrigued to work out and understand how a small country like Ireland was so well positioned to have so many indigenous Reg Tech companies and indeed fintechs, given that Japan has a population of over 125 million people compared with the population here in Ireland of just under 5 million. I guess there really are a number of unique factors and circumstances that all align together to rank us here in Ireland as a global leader in this space. And it is something I could speak about passionately all afternoon, but I'll give you a short overview here of my views really on why Ireland is synonymous with Reg Tech. Ireland's been named by Forbes as one of the best countries in the world to do business in. And if we take the funds industry as just one example of this being one close to my own heart, having spent over 10 years working in the industry before joining the guys here in GECKO early last year, Ireland's funds industry really is one of the biggest and best ranked in the world. In 2019, Ireland was ranked the third largest investment fund global centre in the world and the second largest in Europe. Enterprise Ireland confirmed that in 2020, 250 of the world's leading financial firms, including half of the world's top 50 banks, have internationally focused operations based here in Ireland. This fund-friendly environment, has been grown and developed in Ireland over 30 years with a favourable legal and tax framework, a wide choice of expert service providers, with 40% of global hedge fund assets serviced here in Ireland, making Ireland the largest hedge fund administration centre in the world and indeed Europe's leading hedge fund domicile, adding to this unique system that we have here. This leading global expertise has led to a natural transition of funds experts moving into the Reg Tech sphere, and the fact that so many global financial services companies have an Irish base and Irish operations has been fantastic for us as a company. It's much easier to build a relationship with an Irish office, and we can then implement the system into the Irish branch before rolling it out globally to their other branches over time. If we set aside the financial services industry and take a look at Ireland's tech industry, Ireland benefits from having an exceptional selection of international players with their European bases here. We're home to 9 of the world's top 10 tech companies, including Facebook, Google and Amazon, which has enabled Ireland to have an exceptionally skilled tech workforce. Feeding into this workforce is a constant flow of new talent, Ireland's exceptionally quality education system and plentiful supply of highly qualified people. In 2019, Ireland was ranked number 1 in the world for skilled labour for attracting and retaining talent. When visiting Tokyo, the regulator and indeed many of the large multinational companies that we visited were really impressed with the work of Enterprise Ireland and indeed the IDA. And this was a reminder that government agencies are not universally renowned for this level of support, and EI and the IDA have without doubt both contributed greatly to Ireland's successful Indigenous Reg Tech providers. All of what I've mentioned, coupled with the unique collaboration culture that we have here in Ireland, collaboration with tech, financial service industry experts, and indeed the unique support offered from the Irish government and government agencies really creates a unique opportunity for continued Irish Reg Tech success. Now, tech's an enabler. There's so much new technology available to the industry, but we find that the industry has just not yet fully grasped how best to deploy it. The future is here, but it's not evenly distributed yet. We have highly skilled people completing mundane tasks that can be automated, and it's important to note that Reg Tech and indeed tech should be seen as intended to, not be seen to intend to replace jobs, but to enhance operational efficiency. The deployment of tech will lead to the quality of jobs improving to make them more interesting for those that are completing them. This has been very much the experience at GECKO. Peter, if you want to just switch to the next slide. Perfect. This has been very much the experience at GECKO, a Reg Tech system for financial institutions providing definitive solutions to meet all compliance pain points across the multitude of financial services areas on a global basis. Born out of the frustration of running large-scale compliance projects across multiple jurisdictions on Excel spreadsheets. When asked who our biggest competitor is, to this day, it remains Excel spreadsheets. And just the next slide, Peter, thanks. GECKO's 3-click concept enables a greater focus on substance and resources and allows firms to effectively manage their regulatory oversight, outsourcing and regulator requests. To summarise, Reg Tech growth in Ireland looks set to continue, with Brexit adding its part to the growth with more and more UK financial services firms relocating their business operations to Ireland. COVID will also accelerate the Reg Tech uptake, the need for automation, increased remote working, and really that cockpit of compliance that we offer at GECKO adds real value to processes. Ireland has set itself up as a global base for Reg Tech firms, and I think this will continue over the coming years, with Ireland positioned as a hub and centre of excellence for global Reg Tech. Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you for that.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Elizabeth. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure my video stays off. I'm having some bandwidth problems here. At this particular point of time, I would be turning to Sorcha to, there's your details there, Elizabeth, so to give me your email address, so you're happy to receive correspondence, elizabeth@geckogovernance.com, and like Gary, I understand you're also happy to take the LinkedIn requests as well. Now, just to apologise, Sorcha Mulligan is having difficulties accessing the webinar, or we're having problems bringing her into the room. Things were working quite fine during the tech test that we did before 2 o'clock. Now, Sorcha's been great in making a lot of noise about this event, so I feel quite bad about this. Unfortunately, it is a technology issue, and for some reason, the Zoom program and whatever tech that's being utilised out there are not speaking to each other. Sorcha is going to continue to try and access the event, and if she can join us before we finish, we'll put her piece on there around blockchain and sustainable finance. So, Paul, we're just going to go to you a little bit earlier than we necessarily anticipated. So, if you is that okay with you?
Yeah, Peter, absolutely fine. Okay, look, I'll just kick off, just say a little bit about the department's involvement with FinTech so far, and then just a little bit about future plans, including the DJ FISMA outreach. Look, as I said at the start there, I head up the International Finance Division in the Department of Finance, and one of the roles there of the Ireland for Finance team is working with the continued growth and development of international financial services, working very closely with the Minister of State. I took over this area in May of 16. Initially, it was Owen Murphy, who's gone on to greater things, and then it was Michael Darcy recently. And we're not sure what's going to happen for the future, but look, we're assuming that international financial services will stay within the Department of Finance, and whoever our Minister of State is, we simply don't know for a couple of weeks. But basically, look, to give a bit of background what we did, there was a strategy published in 2016. It was IFS 2020 Ireland for Finance, and basically, it was a 5-year strategy at that time, and FinTech was included at that stage. Now, this seems about 5 years ago, when FinTech wasn't a very large issue for the department, and indeed across a number of other government departments and agencies. But that actually did a lot of work. That first and foremost, it set up a FinTech working group, and secondly, then it developed a FinTech and payment strategy. That was 2016, and that was done with the industry, working with the department and EI. And that was the first time there was a proper strategy set out for the area. Because other things done at that stage was a competitive startup fund, 3 fintech accelerators, and then a lot of companies who started coming in basically after Brexit. Before Brexit, but once it was announced. Over time, then we had a new strategy. It was called Ireland for Finance. That was launched at the end of April of last year by Minister Donoghue and Minister Darcy. And this is 4 pillars to develop the overall international financial services sector through the 5 years to 2025, and reflecting the importance of technology. Technology and innovation has a pillar of its own, so it is one of 4 pillars. And FinTech is one of the key drivers, along with sustainable finance, for the strategy over the 5-year period. So it just shows you from the IFS 2020, which was done in 2016, to the new policy. FinTech has really come on leaps and bounds, and I think, Peter, you're not there of the ecosystem, and we've done some research ourselves on that. It's very, very rich, very, very diverse, and I'll go through some of the sectors in a minute and the importance to Ireland. So look, thank you to everyone for making the commitment and the investment of their time and money, and basically helping us create extra economic activity and then extra jobs as well too. So the policy was launched in April of last year. And as I said, FinTech was one of the key pillars. The Ireland for Finance, like the previous strategy, it's driven by annual action plans. And these are developed and implemented between the state, Department of Finance, other government departments such as the Department of DEBI, IDA, Enterprise Ireland, Central Bank acting as observers, and then with the industry practitioners. And they basically set out a number of measures, let's say if it's a technology and innovation pillar, that will help the continued growth of the sector, and then try and look at basically what sort of challenges and opportunities are coming down the line, and try and deal with those in terms of policy, regulation, and various other kind of moves. We had an action plan for 2019, and then one for 2020. The one for 2020 was developed with the industry and the government players. It wasn't published because we had a general election on the 8th of February. You all know what's happened in the meantime. We're now up to 129 days, 130 days of government formation. Okay, we've a program for government from yesterday, but hopefully we'll get a government in about 2 weeks' time or so. But the action plan was not published because of the election and the lack of a government. Despite it not being published, people have worked away in the background, putting in place the various measures which they committed to do, which is very, very good news. So what we will do when the new government comes in and the new minister is to say to him or her, we have this action plan already, we can reignite it and sort of rejig it a bit, publish it maybe August, or else wait over to maybe 2021. We'll have to see. It's up to the government, but that's just the background we're working on at the moment. As I said already, we're awaiting a new government, a new minister state, and we pushed up international financial services as one of the key areas of work for the department in the coming years, and also then obviously fintech is one of the key pillars of that as well. You will know obviously from COVID that digitization has been a very important thing just in terms of work. The Department of Finance, we have 98% of staff can work remotely. It's obviously the same across a lot of other sectors. And again, it's highlighted the importance of digitalization of retail and then financial services as well. So again, fintech has come to the fore. What's very interesting from our research, and indeed research from the ESRI, OECD, etc., and the IMF, is that international financial services, particularly fintech, has been very, very resilient during the COVID crisis. It's hardly been dented at all, which is basically the nature of the business, and it's also pointing for the future. In terms of the future, we would see digitalization as a key driver of the post-COVID-19 recovery, both for the EU and then for Ireland as well. And obviously, fintech will be one of the key players in that. This importance has been highlighted by Angela Merkel for the German presidency, which is going to start on the 1st of July for the EU. Again, digitalization is one of the key drivers. And then for the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, the MD, has seen again digitalization and sustainability as the two twin drivers of building back better, as what they call it in the World Bank and IMF and G20. So again, we would see fintech as one of the key drivers of the sort of post-COVID-19 recovery. You will see for the program for government yesterday, there's a lot of terms being bandied about, but there's a national recovery plan being mentioned, a recovery fund, national economic plan. But again, we would see fintech as one of the key drivers in that, and financial services as one of the key planks. Again, because it's proven its worth. It's given a lot of extra economic activity, a lot of extra jobs, a lot of connectivity then between existing players and then other people such as third level institutions, etc. Turning now to the DJ FISMA. We've been in very close contact with the Commission over the last couple of years in terms of developing our policy, particularly in relation to fintech, sustainable finance, a number of areas like that. The reason why we are is because Ireland leads on these two areas. Dublin was selected as one of the locations for an outreach event in relation to the Commission's policy on fintech. It was done 3 weeks ago. The Minister for Finance spoke at John Berrigan, who leads up DG FISMA on this area. A number of representative stakeholders that were on the panel. And so basically what they wanted to do, number one, was to highlight the importance of the questionnaire, which you've done already, Peter. The response is due by the 25th of June, but also to highlight that this is really, really a very good opportunity for people to get involved in policy development by the Commission. When the policy comes out in a couple of months' time, there'll be a policy on fintech, smaller policy on payments sort of linked to it. The linkage is a bit unclear at this stage. There'll also be a policy on sustainable finance. All three are run by the same area of the Commission, but it'll be the first major EU financial services legislation to come out post-Brexit. And this is very, very important. So it's the first chance we have of looking at a sort of a brave new world post-Brexit, post the 1st of January. And it's a great chance for people to get involved in that. The fact that Ireland has been involved to get involved in an outreach is very important. But secondly, the Commission have reached out to us and getting involved in a sort of a panel next week in terms of closing up the questionnaire, but also sort of future follow-up work with them, which I think that's a very, very a good thing to do. The reason why it's been done is because we lead on fintech, and that's a key thing, as you to yourselves who are listening in. I suppose the things we want to get across, number one, we'd like people to respond to the questionnaire to show basically we have a vibrant, very, very good business. I suppose the key things the Commission have been captured by, and we want to highlight, number one, we have a very rich and diverse fintech ecosystem. I won't go through all the various subsectors, but you'll be seeing it on your maps here and some of the background. And it's certainly a very, very wide range of activities. We just want to try and capture and articulate then the energy and enthusiasm of the sector. You don't see that in other countries. I've travelled to loads of countries in the last 4 years with various ministers, and Ireland is very unique, along with West Coast of the States, maybe London, Hong Kong, a few other places like that. But we are quite unique. We're quite unique amongst Europe as well, and we need to harness that. I suppose the key thing what I'd like to say to people for the questionnaire is to basically think about the issues that are important to your firm in terms of the development of a single EU market in fintech. Basically, we want to try and play to the strengths that we have, our competitive advantage in Ireland. People mentioned talent, the linkage into third level institutions, the linkage between sort of disruptors, new firms, existing firms, and then the key, obviously, the key global leaders in IT, key leaders in financial services, etc., etc. The other thing to highlight and just have to think about, and you would have seen it from the questionnaire, are what are the challenges and opportunities coming up in the next year, the next 3 years and 5 years. Basically, can we articulate them? The questionnaire does some of these things, and then what can the Commission do to alleviate some of these, and then by extension Ireland, because again, this is a policy for Europe. We'll be putting some of this policy into place through legislation or regulation or through various policies and strategies. So essentially, from sort of the perspective of your firm, your sort of sector, and then the overall general fintech or financial services sector, what challenges are coming up, what blockages, what sort of issues annoy you in your day-to-day business, what kind of things can you get out of the way to try and make you do business from an EU single market perspective. And then basically what opportunities are coming down the tracks that we should be aware of that we can actually capitalise upon in Ireland, and actually get in early at the very, very first stage with the Commission and actually put in place arrangements to do that. So it's just to finish up, the questionnaire and the outreach are just part one of this process. The post-questionnaire is probably the most important bit. As I said earlier, we will have a sort of a deeper and wider engagement with the Commission going forward on this area. They're going to use us basically as a sort of a sounding board for some of their proposals. And we've asked them then, can we engage in various working groups, expert groups, etc., etc. And again, we're doing that because we are a leading centre for fintech. We have very, very good firms in this area. And the Commission are very, very keen to learn why we are successful, why the firms are successful. These firms are successful. What are they seeing as the challenges coming down the line? And again, we lead in areas, I won't name them all up, but payments, Reg Tech, etc., etc. And they're keen to capture that. I suppose in terms of next steps, we would like everyone to fill in the questionnaire, both individually or as collectively in representative groups. The department will also send in a questionnaire, not on behalf of Ireland Inc., but on behalf of the department, taking on board a particular perspective. We will try and sell some of the key points that we have in Ireland, and then basically try and reiterate what are the strengths of the industry here. Essentially, what can Ireland offer to the Commission? We lead on a number of areas. We'll offer that up as good examples. Reg Tech is a good example. Payments is a good example. We'll also try and highlight some of the blockages to future growth and development, and basically what is stopping Europe becoming a sort of a world leader in terms of fintech. And then basically the last thing we'll just highlight, as I said already, would be some of the opportunities, future trends, etc., etc. Just the last thing to say, I have an email here. It's a generic email. It's the Ireland for Finance team. It's IFF, and it's at finance.gov.ie. That's at finance.gov.ie. Or else you can send an email to myself. It's paul.ryan@finance.gov.ie as well. We've a lot of people sending in comments and questions about the questionnaire to date. Since the outreach, we're certainly willing to chat to anyone on the line if there's something that's not clear or people want to highlight a particular aspect. And again, as I said, look, the questionnaire is just sort of the closure of part one of this process. And then we move on to the next stage of working with the Commission. And just to thank you, Peter, for the opportunity today. Thank everyone who's been in contact to date with us and who's taken part in the outreach and various other engagements that we've had over time with the industry. And I'll leave it there and look, can answer any questions or comments later on. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Paul. Listen, Paul, that was great. And obviously there was an AI national strategy as well. And just to say that in relation to the audience that's that registered for today. But when I asked the question about who was aware of the consultation, 60% yes, 40% no. So amongst all the other work that we're doing, hopefully we're all raising awareness of the consultation paper. So it's still pretty good that we have that large number of people that are aware of it. And also, I note that the paper is not just for financial technology firms or financial services firms. It also broadens itself out, and it's looking for comments from individuals as well, since consumers are going to be, obviously a very important stakeholder on this. So please don't think, for all you folk out there, it's only for companies. It's a very broad consultation seeking input from everybody that will be impacted by a digital future. Thank you very much,
Peter, you're dead right. Academics, consumers, etc., and anyone who has a view on this certainly is welcome to give a view on that. So look, I should have said that, and thanks for reiterating that point as well.
No problem. Thank you very much, Paul. Now, folk, through the magic of technology, although Sorcha has been listening to the whole event, we had some trouble with one of the systems that just wouldn't allow her to get in. But she's improvised, and she's adapted. She's overcome, to use the words of Clint Eastwood in Heartbreak Hill, and she's with us. So Sorcha, perfect timing. Paul just finished. I might hand over to you between now and 5 minutes past the hour, just to run through the topics that you're going to sort of unpack when we go to the panel, and we'll kick the panel off pretty much at 5 minutes past the hour. So you've got just around about 6 minutes. That's okay, and I'll put you. I've put you back up here. There you are.
Fantastic. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. And thank you to all the panelists and the audience, and as well, Ruth, for all of your help in getting me online here. I'm delighted I haven't missed the opportunity. So there's three big market shaping developments since Q4 2019 that we need to take advantage of, and I'd like to talk about in the session. We have two new safe haven asset classes in some audiences would class them. So in 2019, Bitcoin was recognized as a safe haven asset, and in recent days and weeks in 2020, ESGs, environmental, social, government investments, have also been recognized as a safe haven asset class, while the VIX, the volatile index, has been fluctuating up and down in Standard & Poor's investments, in gold, in oil and gas, and in the US dollar in particular. So to go into a bit more detail, the crypto hedge fund market. So 2 billion market size in 2019, according to PwC. Crypto hedge funds doubled assets under management in May 2020, up to 44 million average. In Q1 2020, Grayscale Capital in the USA cited that 88% of 818.5 million investment flows were from institutional investors. Anderson Harowitz, one of those institutional investors, raised 450 million in their second crypto asset fund alone. In addition, the ESGs, the environmental, social, governance investments, the market size was 8 billion in 2019 and 4 billion inflows up to March 2020 alone. So haven't factored in what's come in over the last number of months. Now, hedge funds were interviewed by a number of hedge funds were interviewed by Bloomberg back in January, and only 15% of hedge funds were actually subscribing in ESGs because they couldn't see the relevance of data and they couldn't understand the data behind them. And they were actually one of the cap-in-hand sectors to the USA government scheme in the middle of COVID. So on to SDGs, and this is a significant opportunity that we as Ireland and as part of the European Union and as part of the global union need to recognise that the Sustainable Development Goals Agenda 2030, Ireland co-chaired the UN committee that 193 countries committed to reduce climate and environmental impact. But I think I noted 2 to 3 times over a couple of hundred pages of policy over the weekend that the word only appeared twice. So the market opportunity is 12 trillion annually to be unlocked by 2030. 380 million jobs. In Ireland alone, we have 78,000 millionaires. We have 17 billionaires. We're fifth in the EU for billionaires per capita. 25 out of the top 50 global banks and institutions are in Ireland, and we have 1,000 multinationals across our nation. So directly or indirectly, Ireland's wealth is part of the story of blockchain and sustainability success. So what are we going to do? We're missing the opportunity because the finance industry is not aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to educate and we need to recruit, we need to upskill and inform. So current shortfallings of banks and corporates reach Sustainable Development Goals, and blockchain is relevant to this, don't worry. 39% of global banks' lending policies assess beyond global financial risk, only 39%. And that's according to Network for Greening the Financial Institutions. 3% of 6,500 European multinationals achieved significant positive impact in Sustainable Development Goals, according to the Institutional Shareholder Services. So what are we going to do to help them? We have 1,000, as I said, multinationals in Ireland, and that includes top FANG and GAFA, technology companies, pharmaceutical, manufacturing. We're a European hub, and again, 25 of those top 50 banks. Conversely, if we move to the small, medium enterprise economy, so we have 260,000 Irish SMEs, according to CBI 2019 report, 92% of the Irish economy, 22% gross value added to the economy, 48 billion. So micro SMEs, they're an average of 25 years old, according to UCC. Before COVID, 70% of them wanted to remain as they are. So how are we going to factor them into the 5-year plan? Approximately 1 in 4 of those have no digital or no business model strategy. They're the fabric of our society, our retail, food, flower stores, convenience stores. We need to include them. How do we use ESG investments, pension funds, community wealth building initiatives to sustainably digitize and include this segment of the economy financially and visibly in our 5-year plan? So we need to shape the 5-year plan around our entire economy and not just banks and corporates. So 31% of our SMEs are plugged into CRM systems, customer relationship management systems. 28% are connected to ERPs. 21% have invested in supply chain management systems. So how do we code in affordable, inclusive technology for this segment of Ireland's economy as well as the wider EU? 25 million EUs in the 25 million SMEs in the EU, 400 million globally. But let's start locally. 200,000 in Ireland. We need ISO standards, IFRS, SDGs, organic standards to include all of Europe's SMEs in the global as well as local economy. The fourth opportunity is exactly this, is that how do we scale technology affordably as a public service that's inclusive? So Ant Financial in China have a 3-year strategy to onboard 1 million SMEs onto blockchain, 1 million. So we need an EU version, a high volume, low value business model from our world-class tech companies onshore here in Ireland. What has been delivered? Have I got time, Peter? Am I over?
Yeah, we're just run over because I just need to jump in. So anything else we want to talk about, we'll unpack in the Q&As. If that's okay, Sorcha?
Yeah, no, go ahead. I can jump back in.
Thanks very much. So I want to say thanks to all the panelists for their insights. And I'm just putting my video back on here. Just before we jump into the Q&As or into the discussion, there's a couple of questions that have come through, both on chat and also via the Q&A. And Dan, just that question you've asked on the data services legislation, might just expand on that, because I think that's quite a wide question. If you can help me narrow that down, I can then put it to the panel. Just very briefly, I'm not going to talk about the consultation paper at the moment. We're going to do that in the Q&As, but to say that's the hyperlink to have a look at it. The document itself, I've probably, like a number of folk on the line here, read it a few times. Now, I would encourage everybody to do this consultation paper directly through the Commission's portal. Now, I think that's the best port of call. However, if for whatever reason you decide you would like to join an industry consultation one, we're going to put one in as Fintech Ireland. But if there are a number of smaller firms out there or people who are strapped for time, find it difficult to do the EU one, we have put it up, a version of it, on Fintech Ireland under the consultation tab, and the link is just here. So it is live. It is live as a document, and we've copied every question word for word, including 1 or 2 typos in the PDF, but I'm sure I've got a typo that I put in there as well. So that's available for people to complete. I'd like that from our side to get done before the 21st of June so we can have a look at the data and come back to anyone we need to come back to on that. So as I said, that's an option at Fintech Ireland at consultations tab, but I would really recommend you do the consultation directly at the European Commission if you can. And of course, when you do the consultation paper online, I would strongly suggest you have a printed copy or a PDF of the consultation with you, because you do need to jump back and have a look at some of the context. And so what I think I would do is just go through a couple of the questions here in about 30 seconds, just pull out some of the areas that are being raised. Then I'm going to jump into the discussion with the panel members that will take us through to the end of today. So as Paul said, the very first thing that this paper is all about is in relation to opportunities for innovative technologies. And the first question, you can get to see what it's all about. What are the main obstacles to fully reap the opportunities of innovative technologies? Now, Paul also mentioned there's been a series of outreach programs, and many of you may have dialed into the Irish one like I did as well. I've also dialed into 3 or 4 other European Union countries' outreach seminars to hear the different topics that they are discussing, and I found it very informative. I would recommend that you have a look at the European Commission's website, and it says at the moment there's limited places left. On the 23rd of June is the wrap-up session by the European Commission on the outreach program. So go to their website, have a look at that if you have an interest in this, because there's limited seats available, and you'll get the feedback and the summary of all the different events they held as part of the outreach program. And for those of you that love InsurTech, there's actually a roundtable on InsurTech tomorrow, and you can find all those details at the EU Commission's website. But what also is being asked, what are the key advantages and challenges consumers are facing with increasing digitisation? And there are a number of questions, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting, is when you start looking at questions like, for example, number 7, and we're asked about, when building upon our experience, what are the ways the EU can support the uptake of nascent technologies and business models relying on them, while also mitigating the risks posed. And you will see that of the choices you get, you can rank them as irrelevant all the way through to fully relevant, or if it's not applicable to you, then not applicable. But do have a look at that, because I think we might start the Q&A session with this question to the panel members, if I may. I would like to ask, because you've all got this one theme in common, but whether you're a payments business, regulatory technology, advancing sustainable finance, blockchain, is the very broad question. Of course, Paul, please feel free to join. And I might, and what I'm going to do is, because we've only got 20 minutes left, I'm just going to ask each person that I asked the question of just to respond in about 30 seconds, or 30 to 40 seconds, with a short, sharp response on the point. Don't worry about unpacking it too much, because we will run out of time and we won't get through some of the questions that I think might be useful for people to get your views on as they can start formulating their own thinking. So what I'd like to do, if I may, is I might sort of say to you there, Gary, globally scaling financial technology company, you mentioned you're licensed in numerous jurisdictions, right? So what more could the EU do to support, for example, what would have been payments 10 years ago, a nascent type of technology? What do you think the EU could do more of? And how have you seen innovation being supported by your stakeholders?
Yeah, and I think it's a very costly exercise as a regulated financial services firm to, as we mentioned, not only get regulated, in Ireland, passport to the EU, but in fact be regulated globally. To me, it's not so much about the technology, it's the business problem the technology solves. So really, in order to support the uptake of those, technologies, it's really talking about solving problems. And who's going to do that? It's going to be talent. So supporting the entrepreneurs, making sure that we're able to get the funding to entrepreneurs to be able to bring solutions to the market and to scale up, because it's just as expensive, particularly playing in a global, marketplace as we do, to continue scaling as it is to start the business. So supporting those entrepreneurs and making sure that the funding is there. And I think, Paul mentioned the fact that you'll have larger FDI, companies that work hand in hand with the local indigenous firms. So again, I think, having those talent pools, working, with Texco's example of working with the IT Tralee and the different, MasterCard with another commitment to 1,500 jobs, they feed off each other. So it's about that ecosystem with the support to spawn more and more businesses, and that will pop up around individual clusters, be that technology or be that in funds or payments or whatever particular niche it is.
That's perfect. Thank you, Gary. Elizabeth, may I turn to you and just ask you to have a think about that question? And if you look further down, it talks about promoting supervisory innovation hubs and sandboxes. Reg Tech was really born out of a lot of these innovation hubs and sandboxes. And you made a very interesting point around your business and meetings in Japan recently as well. So what do you think about that area there for the EU for greater support, and particularly through the prism of Reg Tech being incubated and sort of growing out of these innovation hubs and sandboxes? Is there more to be done there? Does it help your industry?
Yes, Sandbox absolutely does help our industry, and it's something that we have spoken with the central bank.
And you're a little bit faint there, Elizabeth.
Yeah, sorry, I have kept my video off. Sorry, I'm having some bandwidth issues.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Hopefully that's a bit clearer. But yes, absolutely, Peter. Sandbox is something that we see of great value. We've spoken with the central bank at length about introducing this in Ireland, and the FCS Sandbox has been great success over in the UK, and it is something that we would very much like to see here in Ireland also. Just onto your point, just really around sort of the business problems on a European level, and quite often what the issue can be for us with a European regulation that's transposed then into national law is one part of it, but then each different organisation have their own sort of risk assessment and their own take on regulation. So, where we even take the example of anti-money laundering, one firm in Dublin can have a set of views and say that they don't need to verify your address. And for the exact same activity, another firm can actually require that. And we really find that to be a struggle. And we need direction from Europe and one size sort of to advice to fit all.
Peter, you're on mute.
I'm so disciplined. Thank you very much for the call out there, Gary. The last time you had to tell me to go on mute, do I recall correctly?
I thought I'd lost you there. I was going off on a rant.
You're very sorry. No, you weren't on the rant at all. Thank you, Elizabeth. Sorcha, either in relation to that question, or you and I discussed, I think it was question 21, and there's a few others you may have picked up. But talk to me a little bit about blockchain, and maybe just again in the sort of 30 to 45 seconds, some thoughts in blockchain on either this question or something else that caught your imagination in the consultation paper amongst your research.
Great. Well, thanks for all the LinkedIn requests and messages coming through in the last couple of minutes. I'm delighted with the enthusiasm. I guess I'll stick on to the sandbox side because it's so relevant, and we can learn from the people that have delivered and the companies that have delivered during COVID, because legislation was slightly relaxed so that activity could thrive. So STOs, Black Manta Capital and Brian Elders and Skibbereen with Barfin delivered a 12 million STO raised on Berlin real estate. Okay, and I also had a female intern start yesterday. Good luck, Cheryl. Then with Team Blockchain, I saw somebody asked in question and answers, how can pensions and crypto be aligned? Well, institutional investors in the crypto hedge funds, they do include pension funds, but if we're looking at a specific project, then Team Blockchain in Ireland and the UK, Johnny Fry is the one to talk to about that. Then on to Consultation, who are a trade finance platform based out of Dublin in the Dogpatch Lab. They delivered 1.7 million worth of PPE between Mexico and the USA in April. They've aligned partnerships with MakerDAO, Centrifuge to centralize invoice finance. So we need to learn from the people that have delivered and how we can help other people deliver based on their success.
That is perfect. And look, trade finance again was called out in responses we received to our own survey.
And We Trade, of course, we have as well. Yep. And Trade IX, Marco Polo, we have everybody here on site in Ireland.
Okay, thanks. Paul, is there anything you'd like to add to onto this question, or is it just a reinforcement of the paper? I think I've got you locked on mute there, Paul. I can't unlock you. Can you unlock yourself?
Yeah,
lovely.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. No, I think, Peter, just to, I don't want to add anything new, just to reiterate some of the comments you made earlier, and my own comments and those of the panel. I think we have a very rich ecosystem here. Some prime examples given here from the panelists and stuff we were aware from our own research and close connections with the industry, and just to try and get that message across to the Commission, encourage everyone to get involved in the questionnaire, and just to basically highlight the issues that are important to you and any potential blockages. A number of ones mentioned there. The sandbox is one. We certainly have views on that. I won't say them over the webinar here now, but I've heard seen very good examples myself in various countries. Have heard very good things. Also some sort of negative things about them as well. But look, it's an issue we have to think about. There's a lot of big policy issues there, but I think, look, certainly be very frank, be very open with the questionnaire, and again, highlight the issues that are important to you and it'll help grow your business in the future. And that's about it.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to skip through these slides to the second part of the consultation paper is about removing fragmentation in the single market for digital financial services. So removing that friction. And it talks about obstacles to the single market for digital services and what do you think that they could be, so and how they can be addressed. So I'm not going to ask the panel that question. What I did find interesting was these ones around anti-money laundering. And yesterday I did a webinar with ACAMS and we were talking about AML in relation to cryptocurrencies. But I get this theme coming out of the consultation paper around the whole EID or the EIDAS regulation, digital onboarding process, digital identity, and things that could make things smoother, and particularly looking at harmonising rules under AML legislation, which is a point that Elizabeth touched on as well. So, and this word interoperability continues to come up. So, Gary, is a digital ID, do you think a digital ID is a great thing for the payments industry? Or is that going to take a layer of complexity out from boarding people that you believe and have a view should be giving us, you should be able to service, but you know, there's a difference of view in regulators around Europe about what are the right documentation, how far you need to go in verifying their identity and source of wealth and source of funds.
Yeah, and you know, as I mentioned, we have that not just in Europe but across the world. So we tend to take a fairly, you know, conservative view with regard to making sure that we really know and understand who that end customer is, because you mentioned the word layer in there, and you know, layering is obviously, you know, a red flag from a compliance or AML perspective. You know, normally that term is used where someone's trying to hide the source of their ill-gotten funds, right, by putting them through multiple transactions. But sharing data is, I suppose, you know, equally who's going to take responsibility that the data and that the identity is correct. So, you know, one of the sources of tension in trying to build up ecosystems like this, and indeed the likes of open banking and others, is that you're trying to share data between organizations, but ultimately TransferMate as the regulated entity is the one who has the obligations to the regulator to make sure that we are complying with all the regulations. And if we are to trust another party that is issuing identities, well, you want to be fairly sure that you are protected yourself. So I think we're likely to get towards more of a standardization before we will the common identity. But it's interesting in terms of where this meshes over with new technologies, because it's the two of the main use cases that blockchain will have been touted for quite a period of time, cross-border payments, but the other one being digital identity and a trusted network of identity that organizations can trust. But don't think anyone's quite cracked it yet.
I don't think it had. Sorcha, I'm going to turn to you on another question here, if I may, which is
Sure.
around, because Gary gave me a lovely segue by mentioning data, and under question 26, the people will be aware that the Commission sent out a communication about a European strategy for data. But I thought this one might be of interest to you. At 27, consider the potential that what's the potential for the use of publicly available data brings in finance? Obviously, this is open data moving to open finance, but in particularly, I thought was interesting was the call out for small to medium size enterprise data. And obviously, it's in the whole area that all the information that you're looking at and the reports you're reviewing. I mean, often SME data doesn't really come into the mix. Large listed companies' data becomes publicly available. But will the SMEs want to hand over their data? They'll be the benefits of open data environment, but what's the likelihood they'll want to hand their data over as well?
Well, I think the starting point would be inclusivity first, because we need to have them connected to a digital platform where they can share their data and indeed their accounting information, so they're included in wider financial products and marketplaces. And Steve McFeely used to work in the CSO, the Central Statistics Office in Ireland, now is in the United Nations Trade and Development Team in Geneva. He's the chief statistician, and he wrote a paper on GDP versus EMC squared as a number that we all understand, but why do we respect and value it? And I guess the point there is that we look at SMEs and we think, okay, well, that's a complex segment of our economy that we don't really understand, and they have so many different needs, and it's kind of the same in every other developed economy. But how do you start to unravel that? And the start of it is we have to include them. And if we start to look at donut economics, I've mentioned that on multiple posts, and Jason Curry's tokenomics, which is a blockchain platform, a tokenized platform for the donut economics principles of organic and regenerative farming and inclusion with finance models within, they've identified that Ireland need to achieve 25 to 30% organic output by 2030, and we're currently only achieving 2% of that, and that's worth 200 million towards our GDP, 200 million. So we need to get more of our SMEs, like Organigo and Tralee, who are starting out and want to be on blockchain straight away because they see the value and opportunity that they've been sold. But we have to make it affordable and inclusive.
Okay, that's perfect. I'd like to just turn to Elizabeth, if I may. Elizabeth, I didn't pull out any additional Reg Tech type slides. But just to the audience, every slide you see here which says ECQ27 is obviously a reference to the question in the consultation paper, and I have created a slide for every single question that's in that pack, but we do not have anywhere near the time to go through those for a point of a discussion. But what I would like to ask Elizabeth is that there's a great question at question 41, which talks about, in your opinion, what are the barriers to new Reg Tech solutions? And it asks, is it a lack of harmonisation of EU rules, or is it a lack of trust in newly developed solutions? Or is there a lack of harmonised approach to Reg Tech within the EU? So I think, is Reg Tech being stymied by a lack of harmonisation of EU rules, or a lack of a harmonised approach within the EU, or a lack of trust?
I would say all of the above, if I may. For us, really, one of the biggest barriers is the procurement cycles, and we find, you know, the bigger the organisation, the slower the battleship is to turn. We could be speaking to someone for 1 to 2 years before we get in the door. So it's really about building that trust. You know, a lot of sort of the more industry veterans, they don't trust the technology right away, and they absolutely think that it's here to replace jobs. And so we really need to build on that and show them that it's an enhancement and it's going to make their lives easier and make them more compliant.
Thank you very much. I'm going to leave the last word, actually, because I'm conscious of time. We're at 15:28. I might leave the last word to you, Paul. There's a couple of interesting things here around questions about funding. I mean, this is all wonderful that we all want to do these things, but someone has to pay the bill at the end of the day. And I don't want you to go into any government policy here, but are these fair questions about how the financial sector can contribute to funding the digital transition in the EU?
Sorry, Peter, I lost my connection.
Yeah, sure. Look, I'm not looking to put you on the spot or anything. I'm just calling out this question 46, which says that how could the financial sector in the EU contribute to funding the digital transition? So it's another call upon financial services firms to pay for regulation, right? It's user pays. Is that the way we're heading in Europe more and more?
It's one of the models that is being pushed across Europe, but we haven't a firm view on that, and obviously I can't give it, as you can imagine there.
Yes, sir.
But you know, what we find from firms, leading firms and firms who are keen to grow their business, are already digitizing their product and digitizing their services. They're doing it because it makes money, it makes sense to do, you know. And I think that is a key way to do it in terms of regulation. And you know, Peter, paying for regulation, that's a sort of a big issue. It's a model we push towards in Ireland. And in terms of this area, I'm not sure yet how we're going to respond to that. But I suppose to push it back in one way, the whole aim here of this work from DJ FISMA is the single market. And basically we want regulation and rules and whatever it is to try and help that single market. And we're not talking about the lowest common denominator here. We want some kind of a level playing field. But again, you know, Ireland leads on fintech. We need that to be recognised. So we don't want to bring ourselves down to our lower level, but we also don't want to be hit as a sort of an early exemplar in many ways. So that they're trying out various different ways of paying for regulation, etc. We want something that works for everyone. That so somebody said something in Ireland, it can be ported across to the Baltic states, vice versa, whatever. So that's one of the key things we do here. You know, what are the blockages in doing that? What makes it easy to do business across the way? And if one of them is access to finance, to look at that. People may be aware that there's a new MFF. It's a sort of the annual budget for the EU. It's from 2021 to 27. There's a lot of very exciting things in that. It's a EU recovery fund. There's another fund called Invest EU. And two of the big things in that are digitalization, sustainability, etc. There's a lot of EU money going to come down the tracks, provided directly to governments such as ourselves. We're getting 3 billion under one of these funds, but also putting in a lot more money in terms of research and development, third level institutions, etc., and looking at more collaboration and cooperation across the various sectors. So again, there will be a lot of money there, and a lot of incentives then for people to get involved and actually to accelerate digitalization.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. So we've actually hit the half an hour barrier now. So I'm going to just say, look, we've got a lot of topics we could have covered today. I want to say, and so anybody that sees an idea out of the webinar, maybe to drill down, maybe it's around that issue to do with funding investments or gender balance at fintechs, etc. Please get in contact with us with your idea, though. To come to us with a thought out idea, and we'll see what we can do to get behind. We are a free group. All my contact details are there. You can find them on the internet. And I wanted to say it's a big thank you to Paul. It's great to have you being available. Really appreciate the time of the Department of Finance. No, it's an exceptionally busy week. Wanted to say thank you to Sorcha. I'm glad we got you on after all that hassle to do with the technology. Elizabeth, thank you so much for the slides. Gary, listen, as usual, always great to have a conversation with you and catch up with what's going on in the world of payments. Thanks to all those folk who work behind the scenes, including Ruth, and also my thanks to Mila and Justin at the Department of Finance. So if you guys just want to give a big wave to everybody and say goodbye, I'll end the presentation.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Okay.
Chat
Thank
online.
you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.